Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Internet Censorship and Political Participation in China, a panel discussion co-sponsored by the Weatherhead East Asia Institute, the Center for Chinese Legal Studies, the APEC Study Center, and the Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia University. My name is Howard French. I'm a professor at the J School, the Journalism School, here at Columbia, and I'll be playing the role of the moderator tonight. This event is taking place as part of the annual China Town Hall, an initiative by the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, and tonight's panel will be followed by a live webcast from Beijing by John Huntsman, the United States Ambassador to China, beginning promptly at 8 p.m., which means that we're going to end our questions promptly at 7:50 p.m. Is that right, Mai? Yeah. So our first guest, the first introduction is of Xiaobo Lü, who is just missing one letter, and he would be a Nobel Prize recipient. Xiaobo Lü is professor of political science at Barnard College, political economy of post-socialist transition, political corruption, and Chinese politics. He was the director of the Chinese Global Center's East Asia in Beijing from 2008 to 2010. He was a visiting professor at the School of Public Policy and Management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. He also lectured at Renmin, Zhongshan, and Peking universities, and participated in several conferences on regulatory reform and environmental governance in China. Professor Lü teaches courses on Chinese politics, political corruption, and comparative politics. His recent publications include Tax and Coercion in Rural China, co-authored with Thomas Bernstein. In Odd Helge, you're going to have to help me with this, Feldstad, is that good enough? Yeah. And Mick Moore editions. Capacity and Consent, Taxation and State Building in Developing Countries, Cambridge University Press, 2008. And China's Financial Reforms, A Case of Gradualism and Piecemeal Change, in Charles Calomiri's edition, China's Financial Transition at a Crossroads, Columbia University Press, 2007. He's currently working on a book manuscript on the rise of the regulatory state in China. Professor Lü has received numerous teaching awards and speaks frequently at the invitation of think tanks, civic groups, and policy organizations, including the Council on Foreign Relations, Asia Foundation, Asia Society, World Affairs Council, National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, America Center for International Leadership, China Institute in America, Japan Society, Korea Society. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, and the Committee of 100. He's been a regular commentator on U.S.-China relations and Chinese political and economic issues on PBS, CNN, the BBC, NPR, and any other alphabetical combination you can come up with. Professor Lü has received his PhD in political science from University of California, Berkeley in 1994, and received an individual project fellowship from Open Society Institute in 1998 and 1999, and was appointed a national fellow at the Hoover Institute, Stanford University for the same year. In 2001, he was named an International Affairs Fellow by the Council on Foreign Relations. Professor Lü joined the Barnard faculty in 1994. The guest to my immediate left, Qiang, is the founder and editor-in-chief of China Digital Times, a bilingual China news website, and an adjunct professor at the Graduate School of Journalism at the University of California at Berkeley. He is also the principal investigator of this Counter Power Lab, I love that name, an interdisciplinary faculty-student research group focusing on the intersection of social media, digital activism, and internet freedom, based in the School of Information, University of California at Berkeley. Xiao teaches classes in digital activism and blogging China at both the School of Information and the Graduate School of Journalism at Berkeley. In fall 2003, he launched China Digital Times to explore how to apply cutting-edge technologies to aggregate, organize, and filter online information from and about China. In 2006, Xiao helped initiate and facilitate the Open Net Consensus Forum, which started the process of developing global principles on freedom of expression and privacy, and included Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, and other internet companies, as well as several universities and human rights and civil rights organizations and investors. This process led to the launch of the Global Network Initiative in October 2008. A theoretical physicist by training, Qiang studied at the University of Science and Technology of China and entered the PhD program in astrophysics at the University of Notre Dame. He became a full-time human rights activist after the Tiananmen massacre in 1989. Xiao was the executive director of the New York-based NGO Human Rights in China from 1991 to 2002, and vice chairman of the steering committee of the World Movement for Democracy. He is also a weekly commentator for Radio Free Asia. Xiao was a recipient of the MacArthur Fellowship in 2001 and is profiled in the book Sole Purpose, 40 People Who Are Changing the World for the Better, Melcher Media 2003. He was also a visiting fellow at the Santa Fe Institute in spring 2002. The guest further to the left is Guobin Yang, who is Associate Professor, Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Cultures at Barnard College. His specialty there is social movements, new media, and environmental politics. Professor Yang teaches courses on social science, approaches to East Asia, contemporary Chinese society, the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and social movements in China. Professor Yang's books include The Power of the Internet in China, Citizen Activism Online, 2009, Re-envisioning the Chinese Revolution, The Politics and Poetics of Collective Memories in Reform China, edited with Qing Li, 2007, and Dragon Carving and the Literary Mind, 2 volumes, 2003, an annotated English translation of Wenxin Diaolong. His articles have appeared in the China Quarterly, Modern China, Asian Survey, Journal of Contemporary China, the China Information, the China Review, the Sociological Quarterly, Sociological Forum, Theory and Society, First Monday, and Media, Culture, and Society. Professor Yang received the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation Writing and Research Grant, 2003, was a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Institute, International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C., 2003-2004, and taught as an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, 2000 to 2005. He has a PhD in English literature with a specialty in literary translation from Beijing Foreign Studies University, 1993, and a second PhD in sociology from New York University, 2000. So we'll begin with each professor or each guest will make a short intervention, as they say, and then we will open up the event to questions from the audience.
Okay. Maybe I'll just say.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Howard. I hope we'll have to cut down our speaking time now. This long introduction. Thank you very much. Let me get to it right away. I'd like to begin my remarks by citing an important article, which I think is now quite influential, by George Downs and Bruce Bruno de Mesquita, published in Foreign Affairs in 2005. The article called Development and Democracy, it raises a very interesting puzzle. And the puzzle is why, despite economic growth, some countries still remain undemocratic. Or the question basically, put it otherwise, is why authoritarian regime lasts. And the answer they offer is also very interesting. It says, simply put, these authoritarian regimes have learned to strategically provide public goods while controlling coordination goods, which include which are the public goods that critically affect the ability of political opponents to coordinate, but that have relatively little impact on economic growth. They say there are 4 categories of political coordination goods: political rights, human rights, press freedom, and accessibility to higher education. And of course, in that article, the most frequently cited example is China. Now, the internet is seen as one of the most critical tools to control coordination goods. And they cite the example of China attempt to control Google and other news sites in China. And their article, I think this brings us to the question today, and that is the internet important? Why is it so important in China's political development? How is it controlled by the Chinese authorities? And what does it tell us about China's future political development? I should tell you that I'm not really an expert on internet itself, but a consumer of of news and user of internet. And I lived in China for 2 years and spent a lot of time on Chinese internet. And I did notice that there are some interesting trends in terms of China's internet and political participation in China. Let me just quickly give you an overview, most recent updates about China, internet in China, so that it could help you to think about internet, the issues. By June 2010, this year, China has 420 million internet users, 420 million users, and is an increase of 36 million from the end of 2009. So it's not only large, but also increased very rapidly. Now, in terms of rural users, this is also very important. Who are the users? The 27%, more than 27% of users in China are from rural areas, or about a little bit over 100 million users from that area. And also, the average usage weekly is almost 20 hours, 19.8 hours. So it uses quite frequently for those users. And also, one should bear in mind that China also has a very largest mobile phone users in the world. So in China now, with the 3G technology, Chinese mobile phone users also can log online. So there's with this interface of the two technologies, the usership in China also expanded quite rapidly. Now, also there's a survey asking people what do they use internet for, and that's also very important. There are basically 4 categories. Number 1 is still entertainment. Online music, for example, users number 1 is ranked number 1 is 82.5%. That's number 1. Number 2 is online news, and that's a second category, what I call information gathering. And there are 78.5% of people who use online news. Online search, 76.3%. Instant message, 72.4%. Online games, again, entertainment category, 70.5%. Online videos, even though YouTube, some of the YouTube side, some Western overseas side of video streaming are blocked, but Chinese are all equivalents of those video streaming sites. Online video users, 63.2%. Email, interestingly, only counts for 56.5%. So that's the third category, is communication. Communication is the third category of users, the purpose of the use. And final category is online commerce. In fact, even though this category ranked the lowest among all that 4 categories, it's increasingly the most rapidly in the last year or so. Why internet is so important when it comes to political development, especially in China? I think one argument one could make here is that in a non-democratic system, the power of the internet, on which Professor Yang wrote a book on it, it's enhanced further by the fact there are very limited other channels of information and communication. So in the non-democratic system, the power of internet is exemplified, expanded. And there is indeed evidence to prove that. In a recent survey by a British firm called TNS, it suggests that 54% Chinese users are engaged in digital activities, compared with 56% in Egypt, and 20% in Japan, and 25% in Denmark, and 26% in Finland. So Egypt and China rank much higher than Japan, Finland, and Denmark. And also in the same survey, 64% of Chinese users view internet as the best channel to express opinions. Only fewer than Sub-Saharan Africa and India. So that's also an interesting fact to bear in mind. And also, lastly, I want to cite another fact that also find out by the same surveys. 88% of Chinese users said they have written blogs and commented on forums online, while that same question got only 32% in the United States. So you can see that as expression of opinions, internet is much useful and much used in China today. So to summarize from my point of view is that internet could be seen as two fields. One I call the playing fields. So people still use it as mostly for entertainment. They got music from it, watching videos, and internet gaming. It's very popular in China, and etc. So internet is still used much as a playing field, quote unquote. And secondly, I think it's much important to our discussion today is that it's a battlefield. It's a battlefield because the government on the one hand tries to control it, on the other hand, internet users or netizens called in China Wangmin trying to use it for their own purposes, getting news, doing search online, sending emails, especially commenting on blogs, on news items, sending Twitter is what is called micro blogs in China, and instant message and so on. So it's a battlefield. You have two sides. That on the one hand, the government trying to very much control, trying to block the news that's not so friendly. On the other hand, internet users trying to break that. And also, I would like to highlight one aspect of it, because internet always, whenever it comes to internet, in the overseas press is always described as the Great China Wall or the Great Firewall of China. But I actually think, the more I look at it, the more I think it's much, much like a door, more like a door. Because the government, on the one hand, tries to control this door, how much to open. At the same time, especially in recent years, it tried to open that door as well. So it's not completely a wall, rather it's a door. Because let me just emphasize on the second aspect. I actually see in the last 5 years or so, the government now realized the importance of net opinions, 网络舆情, the opinions online. Now, so much so that they actually now try to open that door, let people express it, willingly or unwillingly, to express public opinions. And there are so many examples of that. Most recently, one can cite the example of this so-called Zhongnanhai Direct. Zhongnanhai being, for those of you who know China, Zhongnanhai being the seat of the central government. Now the peoples.com opened a site called a message board called Zhongnanhai Direct. So people can directly leave a message for the people, all the top leaders, all the members of Politburo, whose photos are online, in which you can click on them, you can see the bios, and you can leave a message. Of course, the message actually after the first day they control it. It's not, you can't see everybody's message on it, but at least we know that even the first day, during the first day, there are thousand messages were left for Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao. And interestingly, the two most popular topics are real estate bubble, high real estate price. The second one is on corruption. So those are those are examples how government now trying to utilize this as pressure valve to let people express. Whether they hear it is a different story. At least that door seems to be open. As I will suggest, that door once open, it's very hard to close. So without further, this time really short. So basically what I'm suggesting is technology is the big winner here. We don't know what's going to be like in terms of its battlefield. But we know that technology is a big winner in this battle. I think technology, as those scholars suggest, is a major tool for controlling and expressing, providing public coordination goods. And I think once that door is open, which I do see that as being knocked open or unwillingly let it open, that's going to be hard to close. So in closing, let me just say that internet gives me hope for more political change, and I'm optimistic when it comes to internet and political participation. I can cite more examples of how Chinese netizens nowadays participate in the internet space. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
20 minutes? Is that, how many?
Probably 15.
15, okay. Good evening. I am humble in many ways to be back in New York and sitting in front of many of you. But I'm humble in particular reason because both on this panel or probably in the most of the room, I'm the only one that has not been back to China for the last 21 years. Anybody else can go to China, visit China, live in China, do research in China. Not me, since Tiananmen, and I became a human rights activist. I'll compensate that by, I can claim, I probably spent more hours than any of you in the Chinese cyberspace. Reading Chinese bloggers, following Chinese tweeters, hanging around in the Chinese BBS, using fake names, not really speaking, but just to register and listening to other people, what they're saying. 15 minutes, let me throw out 3 words to you. River crabs, grass mud horses, and the Great Firewall. The one who laugh know exactly what grass mud horse is. And many of you, I see a lot of Chinese faces there. If you hang on online long enough in the Chinese cyberspace, you know all the 3 words. Unfortunately, I was still encouraged not using image and my PowerPoints. So by words to describe those images is hard. I'm going to try. I'll use my own 3 minutes, 15 minutes to do this, see if I can. River crabs is Chinese translation is 河蟹. Well, it's translated from Chinese word 河蟹, literally river crabs. But 河蟹 in Chinese just happened to be the same pronunciation as harmonious. And if you're familiar with China, then you know that's an official slogan called building a harmonious society everywhere. Even the Olympic opening ceremony, the big he, harmony, is a well thought of, planned, delivered message to the world. That's why China's message, official message to the Chinese people and to the world. Some will say that's actually acknowledge the fact that Chinese society today is it's full of conflict. It's not harmonious, but at least recognize that and trying to giving a go of harmonious society. Why river crab and harmonious society goes together? It's because a Chinese netizen's experience or Chinese citizen's experience that every oppression, every act of censorship, every act of violating civil rights, human rights, also being justified as building harmonious society. It's because we're building harmonious society, we need to close down some websites. It's because we're building harmonious society, we need to arresting some bloggers or delete those blogger posts. And if those content cannot be published, it's because it's not harmonious enough for the public. So time over time, the Chinese netizens were starting to say, instead of saying my blog being deleted or my post being censored, they say, oh, my post being harmonized. The harmonized pretty soon being ate by a river crab. And then it's played by words, different characters. In Chinese language, the crab is not here crabby, meaning you're whiny or something. The crab means bully. Someone using force and not using reason to get what they want. Therefore, river crab becoming the symbol of the censor by power. And if you search the word river crab society, not harmonious society, but river crab society, you'll find millions of the posts, which clearly has a sarcastically, has a satire, but it's a critique to such oppression, censorship conducted online under the name of harmonious society. That's what the river crab is. It's a symbol of the censorship. Well, then what's the grass mud horse? Is this public? Is this on the TV? Am I the professor of the Berkeley School of Journalism? It means fuck your mother. All right. It means in Chinese, literally, sounds exactly like that. It means any human being that the anger, the frustration when your effort to speak out yourself being censored, being suppressed, cannot petition, there's no way you can express yourself, there's no reason given for you, like a public blog post will disappear. You spend hours, days, months, years to build a website and then taking off just like that. The only thing you want to say is, fuck your mother. And why that's grass mud horse? Because in Chinese language, if you switch characters, it becomes literally called grass, mud, horse. And then the people give a very cute face of that. Therefore, grass, mud, horse become a metaphor and a symbol of a resistance online. Therefore, my first point in my speaking today is, all my observation leads to one simple conclusion. Where there's river crab, where there's grass, mud, horses. Where is the censorship? Where is the resistance? And particularly I'm talking about online because they're visible. People taken down by their micro-blogging tweets or that, they don't just keep in silence. If you're a journalist, in order to keep your job, your editor tell you what to do, take up your the article, you don't say a word because you want to keep your job. But if I'm a netizen, I'm a blogger, and the website or internet police took down my blog, at least I can say, grass, mud, horse. And they will say it, and they will repost it, they will try to fight it to attempt they can. But interesting about the internet, my next point is, those micro, what I call a counterpower effort, micro resistance on an individual level, actually has a chance to be aggregated into a bigger force. Some want to say grass, mud, horse and put a grass, mud, horse picture right next to the river crab. That's a very little act. Just express yourself, anger to the situation. But if you Google, or Baidu even, grass, mud, horse by word, you'll find, again, millions of cartoons, pictures, videos, sarcastic jokes, together, collectively. It expresses a powerful message that censorship is a violence against the human spirit, and the Chinese netizens do not accept that as a fact. And that power can be aggregated together, leads to me my next thing, which is Professor Lü Xiaobo has been describing the public opinion. And certain incidents, not all of them, many are still being censored, many are being controlled, state are still powerful. But every once in a while, every week, every month, or every sometime, a little event will becoming bigger. Internet, this is called public events, that whether the corruption case, whether it's a photo about a rich abusing the poor, or sometimes it's about social justice. In the sort of officially tolerated region level, it's not going to be about Nobel Peace Prize because it not go very far on that kind of content. But indirectly, or a little bit roundabout, the same demand for greater freedom of speech, political participation, and democratic reform that has been expressed collectively online through those millions of micro efforts aggregated together. Just cut me off because I lost track of my time. Making one comment on it. What I do every day is watching those events being involved, and some of them are becoming a larger event. While the internet censorship, the censors, the river crabs do exactly the same thing. They want to know what, they want to control the space. Not absolute control, there's not possible at the internet age, but effective control it, to marginalize the information, to set the agenda, and to make sure those smaller effects doesn't becoming a larger scale protest, even the online protest. So the key question here for anyone is that what kind of events, or what factors makes that kind of voice of protest go viral, setting the public agenda, and becoming, and what's the effect? Professor Yang Guobin wrote several very insightful papers and articles about that. I'll leave that room for him. My third word is Great Firewall. Great Firewall, without further explanation, it's a piece of technology right at the national border, gateways with filtering the information in and out. I would take a slightly different take on what Professor Lü said. That's a door. Well, it's a wall, but it's not certainly an iron wall. It's a wall. It's full of leaks, obviously. And the people who knows how to get around can get around it. That's actually a Chinese language. It's called wall and scaled wall, 墙与翻墙. It's the entire political sublingual come from it. But the wall is still important because it sort of deters certain information flow. Again, not for absolute deterring, but effectively enough, not let those information being scaled. And whether it's controlled domestically, like a reverse crab, or whether it's controlled at the border level, which is the Great Firewall, altogether leads to a same conclusion, a picture, which is Professor Lü already described to you. He described it as a battlefield, right? Yeah, I use the word contested space, not much difference. As far as the political level, there is a contested space. Who is contesting who, and what contests what? My final point. It's the universal value contesting what I call the legitimizing course. I wouldn't call that Marxism. Marxism in China is subversive, real Marxism. It's the whatever the ideology and the values and cultural that legitimizing the current power status quo or the current interest of the ruling elites. And on the other side, this is not about a dissident alone. This is not even about a netizens alone. You can hear from Chinese premier himself, it's about universal value and which direction the Chinese political reform really should head to. And that debate is being played out and being aided or enhanced, particularly through the internet, through those protesting voices. So one hand is the government trying to do is to as Professor Xiaobo describing, that treating the internet is a safety valve. They will keep the local power in check more. They will sort of get the sense of public opinion, and they will try to adapt the situation as much as possible. But on the same token, but on the other side, is more sophisticated, more resourceful, and more sort of powerful censorship and control in the cyberspace. The two goes together, and more sophisticated propaganda as well. That's why the contested battle is. Where does it lead to? I'll conclude that way. For those who knows Chinese, do a simple search. Search the word river crab society in Chinese plus freedom speech. And if you search that in the Google blog search in Chinese and try it for years, 2004, 2005, 2007, until now, what you're going to see is the more and more posts mentioning those goes this. If you want to try human rights and political reform, same method, it goes this. If you want to try system reform, citizen freedom speech, it goes like this. You want to try human rights, universal value, the number of posts over the years goes like this. So we'll see something here. This is not social science research, just Google. But it tells you something. It tells you the demand and expression of those fundamental values, freedom of speech, human rights, and democracy, growing irreversibly online in Chinese cyberspace. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I think my remarks will probably tie very well to Professor Lü and Qiang's remarks. And so there will be interesting themes emerging for discussion. I only have about 10 minutes left, so I'll be brief. And just to make my point simple and clear, I'll make my basic point first, and then I'll try to explain as much as possible. Now, the basic argument in my book is about the power of the internet, is how the internet, through the use of the internet, Chinese citizens are creating a contentious civil society. So it's the power, is the contention in cyberspace. And the book came out in June 2009. What I want to emphasize is the new trends since last year, since June 2009. Is the power of the internet growing, or is the power of the internet weakening? My argument is that it is growing, and I'll try to explain why the power of the internet is growing. The basic reason is not because of the loosening of political control of the internet, but because of the persistence of shocking forms of social injustice and the continuing growth of Chinese civil society and citizens' rights consciousness. So this is the main argument I'll try to explain. But first of all, just a few words about the growing power of the internet. I think Professor Lü and Qiang's remarks both point to the same argument that we all agree, I think, that that Chinese citizens are making active use of the internet for contentious purposes, for civic activism. And we have numerous recent examples since June 2009. I will only just mention a few. For instance, the Greene Dam protest, June 2009 about this filtering software. Earlier this year, the so-called eluding the cat. It's very strange. I don't think I have time to explain these incidents. We have cases of Chinese government officials being exposed online, recent cases, but cases all over the past few years. But two notable trends, most notable trends recently are the following. In May this year, April and May, we saw large-scale labor strikes in China. And the internet was actually very important for the migrant workers in these labor strikes. So this is one important new development, which is the use of the internet by organized groups. Now, of all organized groups, labor workers are particularly powerful in modern Chinese history, and the Chinese government is certainly very much aware of this. So you see the implications of this new development. It's also some sort of a generational change, because from studies of labor activism in China, we know that Chinese workers have been very active. Labor strikes are very common, but there are generally isolated cases, cellular cases of activism. There are a few cases where workers could build coalitions, networking with workers in other factories. Now, the internet makes it possible for the young workers to build networks, to communicate information with workers in other places. And this new generation of workers, migrant workers, even though they are migrant workers, they are wired. They use they use cell phones. Rural population is increasing in terms of its connectivity. So this is a notable trend. The second notable trend is the growth of microblogging in China. Microblogging, Twitter activism has been very popular here in the US, and there have been a lot of debates about the power of Twitter. Twitter is blocked in China, but we know that we don't have a concrete number, right? But there are many citizens in China which use Twitter and for activist purposes. the estimates of number of Twitter users vary from about 50,000 to 100,000 and even more. But it's a significant number of people, and these are articulate people. But then at the same time, microblogging services launched by Chinese portals have also become very popular and influential. Sina.com has a very popular microblogging website. Most of these major portal sites have microblogs. And there are not many cases, but there have been some cases where citizens use, even those on Chinese microblogs, use the internet for organizing, for networking, for contentious purposes, particularly exposing corrupt officials, and recent case of Fangzhou exposing intellectual plagiarism, a very notable case in China. So these are two important new trends, and we add many other cases to these new trends, and I would argue that despite the tightening of political control of the internet activism is growing. And we may even argue that probably because of the tightening of political control of the internet activism is growing. So this is the main point I want to make. Let me say a few words about the causes of the growing power of the internet. I mentioned the importance of growth of civil society and rights consciousness. Now, people who have been using the internet in China for years have, I think, already developed a habit of going online whenever they have something to say, whenever they have information to share. So much so that citizens who are not necessarily wired, connected to the internet, will, when such occasions arise, they will try to seek help by contacting bloggers, citizen journalists, and in order to create publicity about their case. There are a number of cases of so-called nail house incidents, right? When isolate citizens, try to contact bloggers, and then in order to put pressure on the local developers. So I think this is a good sign of the growing rights consciousness in China, that not just users, but non-users are becoming more and more aware of the power of the internet, and therefore, when they feel it necessary, when there are occasions, they will turn to the internet. They will not, sometimes, well, traditionally they've been trying to turn to petition offices, right? Mainstream media, mass media, they still do so, but the internet is becoming increasingly important for this population. Now, I think there are also important structural reasons. And structural reasons are, structural conditions are really the rapid and profound transformation of Chinese society, economy, and market, with all kinds of unintended, unanticipated negative consequences of modernization. Environmental pollution, for instance, the forced relocation of households. These are all related to this rapid economic development. And then we have problems with government accountability and transparency. In that sense, internet activism really is a reflection of the kinds of conflicts in Chinese society. Social conflicts are becoming more and more intensified. And if internet activism cannot be stopped, it is because it's a simple, mere reflection of deeper kinds of social conflicts. And I would emphasize that point, the structural causes. I think my time is just about up, and I would like to mention two challenges in the future. And one challenge we are familiar with is the tightening of political control. Not just tightening of political control, but I think a new trend in terms of government approaches to internet is more and more proactive approach to internet management. The Chinese white paper, government white paper on the internet uses the term administration of the internet, is taking a new approach to the internet, managing the internet as if you're managing what you learn from business school, managing, and what kind of things are involved. For instance, 50-cent party. This is a familiar approach. It's not, doesn't seem to be very effective as far as we can tell. There are new developments. Government news websites are going to be able to be listed on the market, on the stock market, so that they will be able to compete with the commercial web portals. So that's important, proactive force of government websites. So this is one thing I would like to emphasize. The other thing I want to emphasize is, I think, not yet very well understood, and we don't know a lot of the details. The so-called commercial 50-cent party. Commercial use of anonymous postings to promote your markets or to attack the rivals, to attack to attack the products of your rivals. We have had a number of cases recently, and I think the potential danger of this trend, if it grows very strong, is that it's going to harm the credibility of information online. We can no longer trust what we read in the blogosphere, in online communities, as we used to, and I think in the long run that will have a negative impact on online participation. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. We have to stop momentarily to allow for the startup of the link to Beijing for the participation of the U.S. ambassador there. Do we have time for a couple of questions? Okay. I was very interested as the moderator. I'm not going to hog up the questions, but I'm interested in teasing out the notion of the battlefield. And each of you came at this from a slightly different direction. And I think this is really, as someone who writes and thinks a lot about the internet himself, I think this is really a very useful concept for understanding the dynamics that are at play here. We have the government, which is not just interested in controlling the internet in the normal ways we think that an authoritarian state might wish to control the internet, but has come to see the internet as a useful tool for its own purposes politically, in terms of understanding political opinion, in terms of manipulating political opinion. In the white paper, which Professor Qiang mentioned, the government also sees the internet as economically indispensable, so it's not something that the state even begins to imagine that it should think about suppressing in some absolute way, even worse come to worse, that this is a vital tool of the state. So I'd like to hear some more from our guests here about, what are the mechanics of this, or what are the pieces in play on this battlefield, and how does this confrontation, if you will, play itself out?
I just want to add one quick comment and move to really two experts on internet. The comment I want to make is this. I think it's, again, I want to emphasize the power of technology itself. The technology advancement really is faster than the attempt to control it. I want to give an example because I really think back about the Chinese political development last century or so. This is quite unprecedented, probably in the world too. That is, you have such advanced technology in a non-democratic system, and it's being used by participation. So the government really now trying to learn itself how to deal with this. One example, again, this unprecedentedness of this technology and political development. This is a true example. Last year, city of Luoyang in Henan province, actually the government invited 3 delegates from netizens, virtual citizens. I mean, this is unheard of, because some people say, who are they? I mean, Chinese government obviously decides who will be nominated by the delegates to the local council. So they invite 3 representatives of Wang Min to the formal NPC, local NPC, and that's very interesting. I mean, there are serious questions about how legitimate it is, or who they really represent. I mean, but the fact that they actually invite virtual citizens who actually were the active ones, commonly using some pseudo names online, to be representative on a participation in the formal channel, it's quite amazing, shall we say. So again, my point is that technology is something that both sides can try to understand and use.
Xiao, would you like to say something quickly?
Okay, I'll try to be quick. Just think of the battlefield I think it's actually a correct metaphor in this case. It's about a power and a counterpower. Power is about a controlled communication space, and the counterpower is about trying to break through that control. The reason is that the battle here is about people's mind and their ability to connect to each other for collective action. Authoritarian regime, as powerful as China is, they have all the coercive power of the military machine, police, and everything else. They have all the economic might as well, can buy off everything, particularly when the economy is doing really well. But what they do not have is the legitimacy of their ideological control, discourse. Even the Liu Xiaobo Nobel Peace Prize, they couldn't come out a coherent, logical argument on that, other than blaming Western trying to subversive China. The foreign spokesperson cannot stand, straight facing the Chinese netizen to say the same thing. He will be tearing apart by online comments. So in people's mind, that's where the battle is. The images, the metaphors, the framing, the priming, the indexing, all the things that people know about public opinion or media power. The internet gave a chance of the powerless people, the people are being ruled, that a chance to express themselves, more importantly, to connect to each other. Don't overlook those consumer networks, those social networks, those gamers, those, but at the time of crisis or times needed, those networks, non-political networks, communication networks are also spreading political messages. And the ruler knows that. Their ability always to divide and control, but when the edge of the network or the road has a way to express themselves and connect themselves, that's where the power shift happens. And that's where the contested space is. And that's what the battle is about.
Very quickly, I also think the battlefield metaphor is very useful for capturing some of the dynamics of internet activism in China. I would only say that, that when we talk about battlefield, it's a matter of win or lose. But it doesn't always happen in this case that it's a matter of win or lose. It's not always a zero-sum game, in my opinion, because, for instance, dealing with corruption, corruption of government officials, both government, central government, and citizens are certainly concerned with this. So there are issues on which citizens and government may agree. Another point I want to make is that to the extent that it is a battlefield, who wins and who loses to what extent depends on not just your own resources and dedication, but also on the kind of allies and coalitions that you can build. So we can broaden our view to think about what kind of allies and the coalitions that the control agencies may have, and what allies the Chinese citizens might have. We mentioned quite a few, actually. But we can also bring in the factor of global civil society as another potential influence. Even the global mass media, I think, increasingly play a role in the Chinese internet battlefield.
Which is why perhaps the Liu Xiaobo nomination, one of the reasons why the Liu Xiaobo nomination is taken as such a big deal by the Chinese state, that this, because of its resonance with global citizenry and global civil society, it is seen as menacing or as a detriment to its own credibility.
Well, to add on that, because authorities are legitimizing discourse in the battlefield, particularly has its own narrative, which is the renaissance of Chinese civilization, building a powerful China. China is rising, which is true, and recognized by the world. Look at the Olympics. Well, this time, a Chinese citizen being recognized by the world, by Nobel Peace Committee particularly, and that hit that argument quite hard.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. A question, please?
Hi. Thank you for a very interesting presentation of global media and internet in China. The question I have
microphone.
Sorry. The question I had was regarding the business reasons for censorship, which were not touched on. Google may have pulled out some of its operation, YouTube is blocked, Facebook is blocked, Twitter is blocked, but Youku, Tudou, Xiaonei, QQ, Sina is not, nor is Baidu. So could you speak a little bit to some of the business reasons that might be behind
Yeah, for those of you who are not familiar with the names, those are Chinese equivalent Twitters, YouTubes, and so on.
I'm gonna, if I just very quickly, I mean, a piece of this may be a simple desire by the Chinese state, which is consistent across the economy in sectors that are seen as strategic, as the internet is seen as strategic, of having national champions. And the Chinese state has had a very deliberate track record over many years of trying to build national champions in strategic areas. Another aspect of this, because the internet is not just any strategic area, among strategic areas, it is a strategic area. Having state actors, Chinese actors that the state can exert, at least in theory, greater coercion upon if the need arises, becomes a matter of strategic importance. And so I think that this, in my own view, and you know, our fellows here will have other points on this, but I think that this becomes squeezing various foreign parties out of the picture has this strategic component to it.
Thank you for raising that question. This also pushes our discussion a little bit broader than the narrow metaphor of battlefield and looking at politics only, because as Professor Lü has said, there's also entertainment, there's also commercial interest, there's innovativeness, innovation technology, and many pieces of Chinese internet development. As a matter of fact, Chinese government is a major driver to build an infrastructure of the internet in China. That's why China has the largest internet sort of market. It's not just dropped there. The Chinese government has to fight it. The Chinese government built it. And trying to control it, build it particularly for the chance of economic development, all of that. So the commercial interest is this. Since it's the largest market, therefore, there's a big piece of money to be made that every company wants to be there. And every company can make there has to cooperate with the government. So the economic interest being leveraged by the government as part of political control, they will tell the internet company, well, do what we wish to do, right? Don't put all the things we don't desire on your servers. Then there's money to be made. If you don't do what we told you to do, well, you know the consequences, right? There's no money to be made for you, but for others who complies. So the economic interest to a certain degree goes together with political control. And that's what the Chinese internet control mechanism really is, except I'm mentioning a final thing. I think the Chinese internet business, including the Chinese companies, large companies, are also secretly fed up with the control, the tightening of the control. It's limited their capacity to compete with other companies, state. It's limited their technology innovation, and it's also increasingly cost them too much. And all the economic expenses of the political censorship will gradually becoming more and more issue, which somewhere can hurt the censorship mechanism of